Hello, and welcome to California Death Row, where we're talking about it. So every last Saturday of the month, we're going to either talk about an exoneree or one that was executed on California's death row. So today is May 29th, and we're going to talk about an exoneree. So there are currently 727 condemned inmates, but California has 6 exonerees. So we're going to talk about Vicente Benavides. He was convicted in 1993. He spent 25 years on death row, and he was exonerated in 2018. So his exoneration made him the 6th death row exoneree for California, but he was the 162nd person to be exonerated from the U.S.'s death row since 1973. So that's quite a few cases, more than just a few. That's quite a lot of cases that have been exonerated from California's death row. So that's why some states are against it, and that's why California's Governor Gavin Newsom is against the death penalty, because it's final, and you can't really go, whoopsies, executed the wrong person. So that's kind of why Gavin Newsom's against California's death row, is because of the number of exonerees that have come off of death row. So Vicente was convicted for the rape, sodomy, and murder of 21-month-old Consuelo Verdugo while babysitting her. And then the special circumstances was murder in the commission of rape and murder in the commission of sodomy. So it was murder, rape, and then either rape, murder, rape, or sodomy, murder. But that's what he was convicted of. So on November 17th, 1991, at 7:30 p.m., Consuelo's mother, Estela, brought her into the emergency room at the Delano Medical Center and reported that Consuelo was hit by and had run into a door and injured her head. Consuelo was limp and flaccid, but responsive to outside stimuli, in that she withdrew from pain and was moving her arms and legs. The only external signs of trauma were abrasion on her forehead. Medical personnel were concerned about a possible head injury, and the internal examination did not include a complete rectal or vaginal examination. They noted slight redness on the inside genitalia at the outer portion of the vagina, and that something obstructed their efforts to insert a catheter. So within an hour, Consuelo's stomach began to distend, her blood pressure fell, and her breathing became labored as she fell into a coma. Suspecting internal injuries, doctors transferred her to the Kern County Medical Center. The transporting paramedic reported that Estela said Consuelo had run into a steel door while chasing her older sister, Christina, who was 9 years old. The emergency room charge nurse found this explanation unsatisfactory because Consuelo had blown pupils, a condition normally related to the blunt trauma of a car accident, and there was no abrasions or contusions on her body to indicate such an accident had occurred. So the nurse attempted to insert a catheter and discovered a massive hematoma or bruise to the external genitalia and a tear from the urethra at the top of the external genitalia to the vaginal opening. Eventually, a smaller rubber feeding tube was inserted as a catheter. Consuelo's abdomen soon became very distended. So the emergency room physician noted severe swelling throughout the entire anal area that absolutely no rectal tone. He suspected Consuelo had been sexually abused, but did not conduct a complete sexual abuse examination because her condition was critical and her resuscitation was his main concern. Consuelo was taken to surgery at midnight, and the pediatric surgeon found recent internal injuries in the midline section of the abdomen. All of the central organs, which was the bowel, the duodenum, and the pancreas, had been compressed and were cracked in half, with portions lying over both sides of the spine and there were injuries to the colon. The surgeon thought these injuries were caused by a kick or a punch. The pediatric surgeon noted scarring and signs of prior injuries, 1 to 2 months old, in the area between the colon and the liver. A pediatrician with an expertise in child endangerment examined Consuelo the following morning. He found a tear in her hymen and a bruise of the perineum. The anus was markedly swollen and gaping. There were tears in the anal sphincter and damage to the sphincter muscles caused by the insertion of some object into the anus and resulting in the loss of sphincter tone. The loss of sphincter tone, the pediatrician concluded, was not caused by the surgery. There was a tear in the back portion of the vaginal wall resulting from the insertion of some object into the vagina, which could explain the initial difficulty in inserting the catheter. The injuries to the anus and vagina were not consistent with Consuelo being hit by or running into a door. So Estella's saying that she ran into a door isn't matching up with what these doctors are seeing. The pediatrician believed Consuelo had been sodomized, that something had penetrated the vaginal area and torn the vaginal wall, and that she had been kicked or punched in the abdomen, causing the internal injuries. So Consuelo's condition remained critical, and on November 19, 1991, she was transferred to UCLA Medical Center for ongoing critical care. The attending physician noted that she was swollen all over, with significant swelling in the external genitalia that precluded him from fully examining her vagina. So due to the swelling, he wasn't able to fully complete this examination. She had abnormal sphincter tone, and a CAT scan revealed no evidence that Consuelo had been struck in the head. In an effort to stop continuing internal bleeding, a second operation, including a splenectomy, was performed on November 20th, 1991. Following the operation, the surgeon examined the external genitalia and the anus and saw no evidence of any lacerations at that time. He explained that his inability to see any anal lacerations could have been due to the significant genital swelling. All efforts to save Consuelo's life failed on November 25th, 1991. So now Consuelo has died, and so that's when they can bring in a forensic pathologist and these experts that can really examine her, and an autopsy can be performed. However, with surgery, sometimes it does skew the results, in a nice way to say it, of what if they didn't do the surgery, of what they would have saw before that surgery. So the forensic pathologist testified that Consuelo died as a result of acute blunt force penetrating injury of the anus that caused lacerations of the anus and injuries to multiple internal organs. Consuelo's anus was expanded to 7 or 8 times, or 8 times its normal size. The injuries to her anus were consistent with penile penetration. There was an acute 1/2 inch tear in the vaginal wall at the opening at the back, and the vagina was purple and bruised. Because the tip of the catheter is soft, the forensic pathologist did not think the numerous attempts to insert a catheter caused the vaginal tear, but rather thought the existence of the vaginal tear was the cause of the difficulty in inserting a catheter. So what this pathologist thought was that there was already a tear, and that by inserting this catheter numerous times, there was difficulty, not that they inserted this catheter numerous times and caused a tear. So the skin between the anus and the vagina had been rubbed off. The anus, vagina, and bladder showed signs of previous injuries that were 4 weeks old. There were bruises and contusions on both sides of the chest and 5 ribs were fractured near the spinal column in a manner consistent with Consuelo being gripped tightly around the chest from behind. There were bruises on Consuelo's back, where thumbs would naturally come to rest when she was grabbed around the chest. There was evidence of previous rib fractures that were 3 to 4 weeks old. There was acute subdural hemorrhage and generalized swelling of the brain, suggesting Consuelo was shaken during the course of the assault. Consuelo suffered from facial abrasion and contusions, including tearing inside the upper lip, consistent with someone holding a hand over her mouth. The injuries to her face were not consistent with a fall or running into something because there were no loose teeth and her nose was not broken. The forensic pathologist believed that after such an assault, Consuelo could not have gotten up and walked around. Estella testified in that November of 1991, she lived in an apartment in Delano with her daughters Cristina and Consuelo. Vicente worked as a farm laborer, living both with fellow farm workers at a motel in McFarland and with Estella in her Delano apartment on her days off from work as a nurse's aide at DMC, which is the Delano Medical Center. On the afternoon of Sunday, November 17, 1991, Consuelo was in good health. Estella testified she changed Consuelo's diaper and then left for work around 6:40 p.m., leaving Vicente to care for Cristina and Consuelo. Cristina and Consuelo were at the table eating hamburgers, and Vicente was sitting watching television when she left. Estella testified that at 7:20 p.m., she received a call from Cristina, who told her Consuelo was pale, sick, and could not breathe. Estella returned home approximately 5 minutes later to find Vicente sitting on the edge of her bed with Consuelo in his arms. Estella immediately drove Consuelo to DMC, accompanied by Vicente and Cristina. When the family arrived at the hospital, Estella parked the car in front of the emergency room and took Consuelo inside. Vicente stayed outside in the car alone for approximately 10 minutes. So while they're inside the emergency room, Vicente is outside, still at the car. Child Protective Services removed Cristina from Estella's custody following Consuelo's death, and that is because they believe that there is penile penetration that had killed Consuelo and that she had these rib fractures, that she had heel scarring. So this kind of gave CPS to come and take Cristina so there isn't any child endangerment that might be happening. So Cristina was removed from Estella's custody, and then as a prerequisite to regaining custody of Cristina, Estella was required to stop having contact with and to stop visiting Vicente in jail, which she had gone several times following his arrest. Estella testified that on May 22, 1992, 6 months after Consuelo's death, Cristina told Estella that she remembered a time when Vicente, who was caring for them alone overnight, took Consuelo and kept her in his locked bedroom until morning. Cristina testified that after her mother left for work on November 17, 1991, Cristina asked Vicente for permission to go out and play with her friend Mirabel, who lived in the same apartment complex. Vicente agreed to let her go and told her to return in 30 minutes. When Cristina left, Consuelo was coloring at the kitchen table and Vicente was cutting onion to cook with eggs for dinner. Cristina went out the front door, which opened inward into the living room of the apartment, and closed the door behind her because it was cold outside. So with this type of door, it swings, well, when you open it, the door swings towards you instead of outward. So Cristina testified that Consuelo stayed inside and did not come near the front door as she was leaving. Cristina further testified that after she had been playing with Mirabel for about 15 minutes. Vicente was acting nervous. He came around the corner of the building and called for her to come home. When Cristina got back to the apartment, Vicente was in Estella's room holding Consuelo. Consuelo was wearing the same clothes she had been wearing when Cristina left, including a diaper. Consuelo had a bruise on her forehead and dried blood under her nose. Vicente was putting alcohol on her forehead. Cristina did not wipe the blood from Consuelo, nor did she pick up anything from the bathroom or bedroom floor. Vicente did not explain what happened, but told Cristina to call Estella at the hospital. Estella came right home and immediately drove Consuelo, Cristina, and Vicente back to DMC. Cristina testified that while they were in the car, Vicente told Estella to drive slowly. She testified that Vicente said Cristina hit Consuelo from the front door when Cristina walked outside, and that he found Consuelo outside, picked her up, sat her on Estella's bed, and then went to get Cristina. Cristina testified she did not hit Consuelo with the door. A Delano Police Department detective interviewed Vicente twice on November 18, 1991. Vicente was informed of his rights pursuant to Miranda v. Arizona prior to the second interview, which took place after he was arrested. So, Miranda v. Arizona is the reason why we have these Miranda rights. And pretty much when you're arrested, the officer that's doing the arrest usually says that you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. You have a right to an attorney. If you can't afford one, that one will be provided for you. And they just say something along those lines. It doesn't have to be those exact words or the exact words that came out of Miranda v. Arizona, but the arrestee does have to be informed of those rights. And if they aren't informed of those rights, then it can actually throw out an entire case, and the police department and prosecution definitely does not want that. So Vicente was informed he can remain silent, that he has the right to an attorney. If he couldn't afford one would be appointed. And usually there has to be some type of acknowledgement that the Miranda rights. So usually say, do you understand what I said? And he's like, yes. And if you want to remain silent, you have to say that you want to remain silent. Just being silent alone and then saying something afterwards that's incriminating does not fit the bill. And that has been argued in a couple cases to where they were informed of the Miranda rights, they did not acknowledge, and then later they said, like, yes, I killed her, and that was used against them, and they were like, but I had the right to remain silent, but they never acknowledged anything. So it was used. So that's why the Miranda rights are important, because it can cause all sorts of issues for prosecution when they are trying to say this is the reason why the defendant is guilty, and it can actually get the entire case thrown out. So that's kind of a lowdown of Miranda v. Arizona. So Vicente was informed of his rights at the second interview. So the second interview, he's now in custodial care, and he has been arrested. Whereas in the first interview, they let you know that you're not arrested. You can voluntarily leave at any time. Usually they have the door open, because if they have it closed and they have the door blocking, that can make a reasonable person believe that they are not allowed to leave, and that can cause even more issues. So he's been placed under arrest, and he has the right to remain silent. He doesn't have to answer any questions. He can plead the fifth. He can get an attorney. So that's what these rights he has to him. So going into the second interview, after being arrested, Vicente told the detective he started preparing dinner for himself, Cristina, and Consuelo when Estella left for work, that Cristina asked for his permission to play with her friend, but she would only be gone for about 15 minutes. Consuelo apparently followed Cristina outside, and Cristina brought her back inside. Vicente told the detective that when Cristina started to go out again, he told her she was to take Consuelo along, but Cristina did not want to and tried to hurry out the door. So Consuelo again attempted to follow. Cristina shut the door hard and quickly. So Vicente told the detective that either just before or just after the door was shut, Vicente returned to the kitchen. About a minute later, he noticed he was hearing no sound from Consuelo. He could not see the front door from the kitchen, and he went into the living room where he found the front door partially ajar. He opened the front door and saw Consuelo right outside the door on a grassy area adjacent to the carport. She was lying on her back looking up, her head slightly tilted to one side, with blood on her nose and mouth, and she was vomiting. Vicente picked her up and took her to Estela's bedroom, put her on the bed, and then cleaned up her face using some toilet tissues. At that point, Vicente said Consuelo looked bad, that her eyes were contorting and rolling, and he could see she was just injured bad. Vicente told the detective he went outside and walked to the end of the apartment building where he met up with Cristina, who was then returning home. Vicente remembered cleaning up vomit, and he confirmed that Consuelo had only been out of his sight for 1 minute. On November 20th, 1991, the criminalist for Kern County Regional Crime Laboratory searched the apartment. She looked for but could not find any blood or vomit or any indication that either had been cleaned up in the area outside or just inside the front door. In a wastebasket near the entrance to the dining room, she found paper towels soaked with vomit that contained semi-digested food particles consistent with a hamburger bun and carpet fibers consistent with the rug in the apartment. She found no dirt or gravel or any other substance she would have expected to find had the vomit been cleaned up from outside. So because she found these carpet fibers in the vomit, the criminalist could be thinking that this vomit actually happened on the carpet and not outside because there's carpet fibers, but there was no dirt, no gravel, no little rocks or things that you'd find outside. And then there were uncooked eggs were found in the bowl on the kitchen counter. So these uncooked eggs semi-confirm that he was in the kitchen cooking eggs. Crayons and a coloring book were found on the dining room table. A criminalist found a towel containing blood and semen on the master bedroom floor. Definitive identification of the donors of the blood and semen was not possible, but the blood was consistent with that of both Estela and Consuelo, and the semen was consistent with that of Vicente. Just because it's consistent with someone, remember, there is no definitive identification saying that 100% this came from this individual. So they cannot say for sure that the semen came from Vicente, but it was consistent. So that's how they kind of play with words to play with words in a way to say that it's him, but they aren't able to say exactly it is him. So this criminalist, she also found drops of blood, which might have been older and which could not be tested. Splattered on the wall of the master bedroom, there was bloody tissues in the bathroom wastebasket and vomit in a pattern indicating it came from a downward motion on the right leg of the pants Vicente was wearing when he was arrested. Neither Vicente's pants nor his underclothes revealed evidence of blood or semen. The clothing that had been removed from Consuelo at DMC and placed in a hospital bag revealed no tearing or dirt or other markings that would indicate that Consuelo had hit the pavement, and no semen was detected. There was no diaper included in the bag of clothing. The only diaper even found in the apartment was a soiled diaper found in the kitchen trash, and it contained no blood. So if you remember Estela's testimony, she said that she changed Consuelo's diaper before leaving. And then Cristina's testimony saying that Consuelo was wearing a diaper when she had left. So, but they only found one diaper and not two diapers. So we're kind of wondering, why is there a missing diaper? So a California Highway Patrol accident investigator testified Consuelo would not have landed outside the apartment door on the grassy area between the building and the carport had she been hit by a car traveling in the driveway or by a car backing into a parking space in the carport. Had a car traveling on the driveway hit Consuelo, he would have expected to see signs of trauma on her clothing, as well as contusions and abrasions at the point of impact. So some of the signs of trauma, if you're hit by a car, if you get hit by the tire especially, you'll kind of have tire markings on you. But depending on this force, and it sometimes takes less force on a smaller child, you would start to see bruising from where the car hit you. So that's what he was looking for, was a point of impact, and if there's any bruises or cuts or scrapes, that would indicate that she was hit by this car that supposedly may have happened based on Vicente saying that she was lying in a carport or near the carport. A microscopic examination of her clothing revealed no signs of trauma. Had a car backing into a space in the carport hit her, he would have had expected to see far less severe injuries to Consuelo and possibly damage to the carport pole. He found no damage to the carport pole. He had never seen vaginal or anal injuries result from a car accident. So this went into jury deliberation, and the jury found Vicente guilty of murder of Consuelo Verdugo, rape, sodomy, and lewd act. And you usually see lewd act in cases to where the defendant is a minor. Sometimes in California, it will say lewd conduct upon a minor under the age of 14. So it really depends what this lewd conduct is saying, that Consuelo was a minor and the defendant was an adult, and there was some type of rape or sodomy, but he was found guilty of both. So that's what lewd conduct is. And then the jury found true the special circumstances of felony murder rape, felony murder sodomy, and felony murder lewd conduct. So now that they found true of the special circumstance, now they'll move into the penalty phase, and that's where they determine life without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. So at the penalty phase, the jury fixed the punishment for this murder, rape, murder, sodomy, and murder lewd conduct at death, and then the trial court rendered judgment to death. So this case got an automatic appeal because it is a death penalty case, well, capital punishment case, and it went to the Supreme Court of California. It decided on August 10, 2000, and it affirmed the judgment in its entirety. And so after the Supreme Court of California, in order to hear your case at the Supreme Court, that's where you write the writ of cert, and you're asking the Supreme Court to listen to your case and to pretty much render judgment of give them a new trial or to affirm the judgment. So this never went to the U.S. Supreme Court, but the defendant was able to write a writ of habeas corpus. And a writ of habeas corpus means to produce the body, and it's pretty much to produce evidence saying this is why the defendant is in jail or prison. And this is where you have an outside attorneys write this for you. The Innocence Project actually took on Vicente's case, and they actually, in 2007, filed a 395-page petition for a writ of habeas corpus. And what you produce in the habeas corpus is essentially new evidence, presenting your case saying why this is exculpatory evidence. It can even explain why, your attorney was ineffective of counsel and malpractice. All of these issues can arise in the habeas corpus, and it can actually be brought to state court, or it can be brought to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court will usually deny it and wants you to exhaust all of your appeals first and then exhaust your habeas corpus through the state courts. So this actually went to a state court, the Supreme Court of California, and in this 395-page petition, they brought up false medical testimony, the police and prosecution withheld evidence, the prosecution made improper arguments, the failure of Vicente's defense attorneys to provide adequate defense, and later, which they can include, is that the attorneys for Vicente were either disbarred or suspended. So that kind of is playing with, kind of going with how he did have inadequate defense counsel and that his attorneys were even disbarred or suspended, and that could possibly be why they were inadequate. And then also what was not brought up at trial is that Vicente's mental capacity was that of a 7-year-old. And if the defense knew they had this, that his mental capacity was that of a 7-year-old, he would bring this up to jury as mitigating evidence and the reason why their client should not receive the death penalty. Most of their petition did focus on medical testimony, so that was majority of it because that medical testimony is what essentially did put him in jail, or sorry, in prison. And so the Supreme Court of California responded on March 12, 2018. So this is when they made their decision. And they issued an order to show cause on his claims that his convictions were based on false evidence and that he received ineffective assistance of counsel. So the respondent, which is the state, and if you're looking at a writ of habeas corpus, the appellate, which is Vicente, that's going to be his name, and then for the respondent, it's going to show the warden's name of the prison where he is being held. So it won't say the state of California, it will say the warden's name because that is where Vicente is housed in habeas corpus. Like when you produce the body, who has the body, it's the warden at this prison. So that's what their names are listed as, but the respondent will obviously have attorneys responding for him. So the respondent concedes that false evidence was introduced at trial and that Vicente's convictions of substantial sexual offenses, of special circumstance findings, and judgment of death must be vacated. So the Supreme Court of California vacated everything in its entirety, but the respondent, the state, they urged the Supreme Court of California to reduce the murder conviction from first-degree murder to second-degree murder. So they still wanted this murder conviction that would have put him in prison, but he would have the possibility of parole or even getting out with second-degree murder. But the Supreme Court of California said, nope, we're going to vacate this judgment in its entirety. And so where is Vicente Benavides now? When he was released from prison, one of the Innocence Project's lawyer was there to greet him outside this prison, and he is now a free man. So on April 19th, 2018, Kern County District Attorney moved to dismiss the charges, and Vicente was released. Since he was falsely convicted, he spent 25 years of his life in prison that he will not get back. In June 2019, he filed a lawsuit seeking compensation from Kern County. So that lawsuit is still in the courts. I have not seen anything of it, but usually with those lawsuits, with the Innocence Project, and they were exonerated, you usually see money. However, it's usually not enough because you can't take back those years that you were in prison for this false evidence for ineffective of counsel. But he is one of 6 California death row exonerees. There are, if you go across the states, there are a lot more of his cases that are like his, that is based off ineffective of counsel and with false medical testimony. In his case, there was no DNA that exonerated him. So if you go to the Innocence Project, they have like an Innocence Project database, and you can see all those innocents that have been released. So he is out. He is a free man now, but he does have that lawsuit. Thank you for listening to us. If you like listening to exonerees, just hold out for the last Saturday of each month. Well, also last Saturdays, we'll add in some of those that have been executed and kind of talk more about California's lethal injection and the reason why we haven't executed anyone since 2006. So thank you for listening. Give us a like, a follow, a subscribe. We're on Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube at the moment. Thank you.